Okay, we're going to finish up chapter 6 here and say a few more things about woody stems and then talk a little bit about some specialized stems. So kind of a continuation with what we did last time. Remember, stems are an above ground part, generally an above ground part of plants. They are supportive. They give rise to leaves and buds. They include the apical meristem and some secondary meristems, as well as vascular tissues, cork cambium, things like that. Um, with our first program on stems, we gave rise to that. We talked about stems in cross section. So I've got herbaceous stems there, and then I'm showing a woody stem there with a little more structure, having secondary xylem and secondary phloem. And so you can get some idea there. And in addition, now we're going to continue on with woody plants and talk about some specialized stems. Remember, woody dicots, they had concentric layers of secondary tissue. Wood is mostly secondary xylem, and what you see are annual growth rings that are due to the xylem forming differently at different times of year. So that the larger vessels are formed during the spring when there's lots of moisture, and smaller vessels and tracheids are formed in the fall. Wood also is going to contain some elements of lateral conduction in the secondary xylem. These include tracheids, ray cells, vessel elements, things like that. You can see those kind of going laterally in the direction of the pen there. Okay, sometimes you can see those in cross sections, but also you can see differences in the secondary xylem based on its age. Heartwood in the center of the tree is generally dark, dense. It's the oldest wood. Usually this contains no living cells. The cells are dead and non-functional. They may have collapsed or been filled with deposits called tylosis. Sometimes the heartwood will rot out completely. That really doesn't affect the tree too much as long as there's enough sapwood. The sapwood contains living cells, usually light in color, that is functioning. That means carrying water. They are not blocked. They are not collapsed. Um, Cone-bearing trees are generally similar. You'll see annual rings, but they'll also contain some different kinds of elements. They'll contain tracheids and resin canals, and they all won't have fibers in the vessel cells. So usually this means they're not as hard, and it also means that they're more often are having these aromatic compounds that might be used to defend the plant against insect infestations or fungus, things like that. Heartwoods can be quite hard though. May have a lot of lignin in, they may be quite durable. I also should mention that there are some monocot stems that do have woody tissue, but it looks very different. You won't see annual rings. Here you'll see scattered vascular bundles, no cambia. You'll see lots of sclerenchymal cells and parenchymal cells. They'll form the woody tissue. Um, Generally, this won't make very good lumber, but it does contain some really fast-growing trees like palms and bamboo, can be quite useful. Very good sources of pulp in some cases, or fibers that are really kind of nice. Different woods are quite different depending upon how fast they grow and the major and minor chemicals. Of course, all wood contains cellulose. That's the primary chemical, but there are some other important chemical compounds there. Lignin, one of the main ones. Lignin is an aromatic organic compound that adds a lot of stiffness and hardness to the wood. Woods that are dense and hard often contain lots of lignin. Some components, particularly in some of the softwoods, will be things like resins and gums and oils, although sometimes you get those from broadleaf trees. These are often really valuable in that they can be refined and separated into different components that can be used for lots of synthetic or as a base for other chemicals. Resin has always been made into pitch. Oils have been collected. Tannins, which are again more organic compounds that may be common in some more common in some trees than others, have been used to tan leather, and they are associated with wood that has good resistance to decay. So like oaks have a lot of tannin and various things. Also, wood, depending on its density, how many air spaces are in it, may have high specific gravity. If it's very dense, um, the chemical components will affect its durability as well. Wood is also used to make lumber, dimensional lumber. This is almost always secondary xylem. The value of the lumber will depend on many things, the presence or absence of knots, the straightness of the grain, how easily the lumber can be shaped, the attractiveness of it, its durability, and so on and so forth. Uh, Wood is most valuable if it can be converted into lumber, but there's many other uses. Lumber or wood can be converted into sawdust or chipped, and then that pulp can be made into lots of different things like paper, particle board, cardboard, things like that. We can also extract various chemicals and use them as bases for synthetics. We can use them as bases for pharmaceuticals. Uh, Probably one of the least valuable uses of wood is as a source of fuel. But wood is in many places used that way. All right, I want to shift gears and talk about specialized stems. These are often for reproduction or storage. Um, Different versions of these are common. Here's an example of rhizomes. These are near or just below the ground surface. They can give rise to storage organs like tubers. Some examples of these are bamboo forms these for reproduction. Turmeric and ginger are extracted from rhizomes or tubers and have a lot of value. Stolons are a lot like rhizomes, but they're generally above the ground. They are most often reproductive, so you get asexual reproduction by that way. Often a new plant will pop up, and when that does, usually the stolon will die away. And so might be hard to tell what's a big clone there. Strawberries form that way, for example. Um, Other specialized stems include cladophylls, which are a very branching structure from a petiole and gives rise to a cluster of leaves. Tendrils are usually stems or modified petioles for climbing plants. Corms are swollen underground stems used for storage, and see them often giving rise to new plants. And so I think that's gladiolus. There's lots of storage stems. Tubers are thickened rhizomes or stolons. Potatoes are that way. Bulbs are, again, a swollen storage organ with fleshy leaves surrounding a bud. Onion's a good example of that. Those are the leaves, and there's a bud inside there. Another example are corms, another storage organ that's below the ground. Taro is an important example. So to conclude, stems are important structures. They contain meristems, growth tissues. They are usually full of vascular tissues, both primary and secondary, both phloem and xylem. Stems give rise to leaves, to epidermis and cork cambium, or basically bark. Stems vary in structure. Herbaceous stems have certain structure. Woody plants usually have a separate structure, and you have specialized stems. But stems themselves are important. We'll refer back to stems as we talk about leaves and roots and things like that. Okay, I'll see you in person on Wednesday.